I am Kamali. You're watching Newsfeed. Here are some of the things people are talking about and some of the stuff they're sharing around the world. The US military reckons with its racist past. Indian actors called out for hypocrisy over their performative wokeness. A Cold War is brewing in the Arctic. And everything that goes up must come down. And top of our newsfeed, the US military and symbolism. Americans seem to be beginning to realize that many of these symbols that they hold dear, which say to them, America, are actually testament to slavery and oppression. Watch this.
The US military has become the latest American institution forced to rethink its connection to slavery and racism. In a tweet, the US Chief of Naval Operations says he will direct his staff to craft an order banning the Confederate battle flag from all public spaces on Navy ships, aircraft, and submarines. He's following in the footsteps of the Marine Corps, which ordered a similar policy in February. During the American Civil War, the Confederate flag was used to represent the 11 southern states that fought to secede from the United States. They fought to maintain slavery. The flag is a point of contention between those who insist it's a symbol of Southern heritage and others who say it's a rallying cry for white supremacists. Supporters of the Navy's decision celebrated on Twitter like this veteran. Others questioned why it's taken so long. On Monday, the Secretary of the US Army and Secretary of Defense were said to be holding bipartisan conversations about renaming a dozen major bases. At the moment, they bear the names of Confederate military leaders, people who fought against the US government. The Army has 10 bases named after Confederate generals across the South. They include Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Fort Benning in Georgia, and Fort Hood in Texas. In any other nation, such men would have been branded traitors. The possibilities of renaming these bases is significant because the Army has been accused of dragging its feet on this issue for years. Over the years, the US military has reflected the country's divided race relations and social progression. Its evolution has even been reflected in numerous films like Glory. And while the latest developments have come off the back of the current Black Lives Matter protests, critics argue the military has been slow to diversify its leadership.
I'm thinking about how full I am with emotion, not just for George Floyd, but the many African Americans that have suffered the same fate as George Floyd.
On Tuesday, the Air Force announced its first Black Chief of Staff, General Charles Q. Brown. The latest figures from Statista show Black people are underrepresented in the military's most senior ranks. Removing statues and symbols of America's darkest moments is significant. The greater victory will be dismantling institutional racism, and it's going to take more than new names and removing flags to do that.
All right, let's take a look at some of the other anti-racism stories from around the world. United Nations staff can join anti-racism protests. There was some confusion after a memo was sent to UN workers saying that as an international civil servant, they are required to be impartial and taking part in demonstrations may not be consistent with that. Now, understandably, that led many to question what the point of the United Nations was, if not to bring people together through denouncing the racist structures that keep them apart. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, now says staff can protest in a purely private capacity. There are a number of petitions running online right now calling on the US government to declare the Ku Klux Klan a terrorist organization. The KKK are currently classified as a domestic extremist organization. The US dictionary, Merriam-Webster, says it will update its definition of racism. It comes after a woman named Kennedy Mitchum contacted the dictionary, telling them she felt the language they use was not reflective of the systemic nature of racism. The dictionary said they will also update words related to racism or with racist connotations. And Gone with the Wind has gone in the bin for a while. The film epic from 1939, which glowingly and lovingly depicts white Southerners in antebellum, that's the pre-Civil War US South, while making caricatures of black people, perpetuating racial stereotypes and diminishing the savagery that was slavery has been taken down from the streaming service HBO Max temporarily. HBO say that they will put the film back up and do so with a discussion of its historical context and a denouncement of the very depictions that feature in it. The decision to pull the film for a bit came after an op-ed written in the LA Times by John Ridley, the screenwriter for 12 Years a Slave. Well, colorism is another facet of racism that needs to be tackled, and in India it's tied up with the caste system. So it's perhaps not surprising that when Bollywood actors tried to show solidarity with black people recently, they were called out for their hypocrisy, as many of them had featured in adverts which promoted skin lightening products.
Several Bollywood stars have taken to social media to voice their support for anti-racism protests. But some actors, including Priyanka Chopra, Deepika Padukone and Sonam Kapoor, are facing some backlash. They have been called hypocritical. Each of them has starred in advertisement for skin whitening products in the past. The skin whitening industry in India is worth $500 million.
90% of Indian women want to use whiteners because it is aspirational, like losing weight. A fair skin is like education, regarded as a social and economic step up.
And it's not just women, even men are using skin whitening products. So what's behind India's obsession with white skin? Experts say it is the deep-rooted internalized racism and social hierarchies based on skin color. It stems from India's caste system, an ancient Hindu social order. Brahmins, the highest caste, are traditionally associated with a fair skin tone, while lower castes are portrayed in darker shades. Colorism was further institutionalized by the British, who colonized the subcontinent and embedded the fair skin ideal in the country's national identity. Post-independence, films and songs continued to glorify fairer skin, leading to a boom in sales of skin whitening products.
इंडिया में जितने लोग उतने रंग, मगर फिर भी हम नहीं सुधरेंगे.
In 2017, an advocacy group started a Dark is Beautiful campaign to create awareness around the issue. And this year, the Indian government proposed banning the advertising of whitening cream. But most agree it will take more than that to end India's love affair with paleness. As the world marches in support of Black Lives Matter, colorism shows that racism comes in many shades.
Well, police brutality happens all over the world, and all over the world people are protesting against it, as seen on the streets of the Kenyan capital, Nairobi.
Hundreds of protesters marched against Kenyan police brutality in Nairobi, a week after a homeless man was shot dead by security forces for violating a coronavirus curfew. Kenya's Independent Policing Oversight Authority said last week that they have received 87 complaints against police behavior since the coronavirus curfew began on March 27. The Kenyan police are often accused by rights groups of using excessive force and conducting unlawful killings, especially in poor neighborhoods. But extreme policing of the COVID-19 lockdown has brought the issue of police violence to the forefront.
Niko hapa leo kutetea vijana wetu wale ambaye wamekufa kupitia mikono ya polisi bila hatia yoyote. Na tumesema sasa enough is enough. Kama wamama wa Mathare tumeuiwa vijana sana. Vijana wetu wanauliwa kiholela.
Law enforcement has been involved in the deaths of 15 people since the country imposed a nighttime curfew. In 31 other incidents, victims reported sustained injuries. Among them was 13-year-old Yasin Moyo, who was gunned down by a police officer on March 30th. He suffered a fatal bullet wound while playing on a balcony in Nairobi just after the curfew had started. The protests against police violence took place despite warnings by the authorities that protesters could face jail time for challenging lockdown measures. Demonstrators accused the Kenyan police of unjustly targeting people from low-income areas while treating the rich differently.
Serikali haijasikia uchungu wetu. Watu wengine wanapewa justice kwa sababu wanatoka kwa familia nzuri ambazo zinajiweza. Sisi tuwezi kupata justice kwa sababu tunatoka kwa mitaa duni, sababu sisi ni maskini. Naomba serikali, yule tajiri ni sana maskini.
Interior Minister Fred Matiang'i criticized police excesses, but took exception to painting the entire force with the same brush. He said the country's chief prosecutor, Nurdin Haji, has formed a specialized unit to speedily handle cases of police violence.
All right, let's take a look at some other COVID-19 related stories making news. France has launched an investigation into its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. It will not examine if care homes should face liability for their actions or assign political or administrative blame. There have been 60 complaints from French labour unions which allege failings in bringing in protection for workers. Brazil has started putting data about the numbers of people dying from COVID-19 online again. The site where the data was held was scrubbed a couple of days ago at the request of Brazil's president. The Supreme Court has ruled it must begin collecting and publishing data once again. Brazil's president has also threatened to take his country out of the World Health Organization. 38,000 people are known to have died from COVID-19 in Brazil, the third highest in the world behind the US and the UK. 1,200 Brazilians died yesterday from the disease. Elon Musk made his employees go back to work for him when the factory he owns was in was telling people to stay at home and isolate. Now the Washington Post report that several people who work in that factory have tested positive for COVID-19. And China has removed pangolins from its 2020 China Pharmacopoeia. That means they will no longer be recommended for use in traditional Chinese medicine. Pangolins do carry coronaviruses, but the Pharmacopoeia says they will no longer list endangered species for use. All right, now we will go to the not so frozen anymore north for a story of superpower competition and a scramble for resources and supremacy. Here's Louis.
The title says it all. Donald Trump wants his administration to come up with a plan for Antarctica and the Arctic in 60 days. The president wants new icebreakers and new bases by the end of the decade. The US currently has just one heavy icebreaker, way behind Russia, which has 40. The US's old foe immediately took notice of Trump's memo and said it will respond to, quote, encroachment on national interests in the Arctic.
The Arctic can still be maintained as an area of cooperation rather than an area of competition. We'll not in any way stay quiet though if someone, and I'm in no mood for finger pointing, would try to test our readiness to defend our interests of national security in this area.
With ice melting in the Arctic due to global heating, tensions as well as temperatures are rising. It's an area of great interest for oil and gas exploration and rare earth mineral extraction. And the melting ice can be seen as an opportunity as it will open up new shipping routes. That had led to increased militarization of the region. Just last month, the US Navy and the Royal Navy conducted joint patrols of the Barents Sea. And on Monday, NATO warned that China is increasing its presence in the Arctic.
Finally, in a world of greater global competition, where we see China coming closer to us from the Arctic to cyberspace, NATO needs a more global approach. This is not about a global presence, but about a global approach.
All of this is happening while environmental activists are still hoping the Arctic can be saved.
And finally, a look at the failure of a piece of tech that the world neither wants or needs. Well, this happened in Dubai, where a company called Hoverbike wanted to test a toy only people with more money than sense could want. Oh, and the Dubai police force, of course. Now, as you can see, this hoverbike goes up and then comes down with all the grace and control of a falling rock. Now, the rider was not injured, thankfully. The bikes cost $150,000 each, and you can keep them. Thanks for nothing, Hoverbike. And that will be all from the Newsfeed team. Do reach out to me with your questions, comments, complaints, and suggestions. You'll find me at Kamali Melbourne on Twitter. If you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for being with us, and I'll see you again tomorrow.